Okay. Hi everyone, this is SmithyQ, SmithyQ.com, and I'm back with another video analysis. Today's going to be a little bit different. Um, One of my guilty pleasures is watching the internet Blitz games, just from random people, generally the higher rated Blitz games, right? And it's incredible to see them move so quickly, to see so many tactics, and just the level of play is phenomenal. And today I saw an incredible game between Glig and Little Pumpkin, and I was spellbound watching it, and to the point where I analyzed it after. I thought this would be an excellent game. So I'm going to share it with you guys today. The first is simply it's fun. It's entertaining seeing all the tactics, everything that went on in this game. But also, I think we can use it as a way to improve our own game. And hopefully we can get some tips. So first, I'm just going to go through the game quickly. And so Glig was white. Just going to skip through the opening a little bit. This is the Catalan. And so we can see what's happened here is that so far white gambled the pawn. Not really, because he won it back with the queen. We reach this position. Bishop b7, so both sides have three pieces developed. White castles, c5, d takes, bishop takes, rook d1, rook c8. And this was the first real think in the game. I mean, it's Blitz, right? But this is the first time someone took more than a few seconds to make a move. And we can see the problem is that with white's last move, he put his rook eyeing up black's queen, and then black did the same thing. He moved his rook over, it's eyeing up white's queen. The problem is that white's queen is in far more danger, because if white does nothing, then bishop takes, and he's going to lose his queen. Trying to block with, say, knight c3, well, that's just going to run into b4, the knight moves somewhere there, why not? And then the exact same tactic would be possible. And so white was trying to think where to move the queen. And it's not so easy. And so he eventually decided on queen b3. Well, we chase it around, and that queen goes to d2. And then here black finds or sees an interesting tactical idea. He takes the knight, recapture, jumps in. So now the knight is attacking the queen. There's also a double attack here on f2, and things look very good for black. But then white finds a counter tactic, which is incredible. Take, 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 and then knight e5 check. So white's temporarily down the exchange. However, the bishop is attacking the knight. He can't defend it because he's in check. And there's also the threat of knight takes f7. If king e7 take, then white simply has two pieces for the rook, and his pieces are better coordinated. White's got the better position. So instead, black tries king d6, so that way after knight takes f7, then he takes the rook. So it's true, temporarily white's up a piece. However, this knight is trapped, right? It can't escape anywhere. Both things are covered by the pieces. And so black cashes on f2. Now, there is this potential discovered attacks. The knight can move, perhaps to g4 or h3. It can go somewhere. But white doesn't worry about that. He keeps pressing forward. Bishop g5. Only now does he block it in, because now his bishop's outside the pawn. One of those little things, right, that make a big difference. The bishop is much more active. Knight moves. All right, now with the rook comes in. We defend a pawn. h6, all right? h3, right? Like, look at this. Instead of the automatic move, bishop f4, white counterattacks. Sorry. And then here, all of a sudden, things might look dire, because the knight is attacking the rook and the bishop is hanging. This knight is still trapped. Did white mess up? And honestly, he did. However, he finds, again, a saving tactic, right? Rook, take, 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 ha. So then we arrive to this position. So black is up a pawn. That's good. And this knight is still trapped. However, it's less trapped than it was, because before the king was controlling this square and a pawn was controlling this square, But now, if this knight were to move, this knight could escape. And so now the game is going to... This whole game, with all these tactics, is going to determine whether this knight is able to escape or not. Right? We could see that, for instance, after a bishop e4 that was likely coming. Maybe the knight can escape that way. Maybe. Let's see. So first we bring the king out, attacks the pawn, defends it, king e7. The king's getting closer to the knight. Bishop e4. Uh-oh, king f6. So now the king and the knight are both controlling this square. Can the knight escape? h4, g6, g4, a5. Now both people, they had very little time left at this point, and black had missed the idea that white was trying. After h5, g5, we now see the pawn is here, and that lets the knight escape. That's incredible. And then from here, even though white is down 2 pawns, in this position, they're both very low on time, and so it was kind of almost who was going to flag the other person. But then also, it's an opposite colored bishop endgame. And white, all of his pawns are on light squares. I can probably just color them. And so that means this bishop can't attack them. So the only way that black can make progress is if his king can push his pawns forward or try to win the white pawns. Now this also means that white's bishop can defend all of his pawns. And so this is a very difficult endgame. In fact, it's drawn. We can see that black tries to move around, but there's no way to get in. We see the pawn is controlling it, the king is controlling all these squares, the bishop's controlling squares as well, and there's no way. All right, let me just color them in. Because white never needs to move his king. Obviously, he's not going to move the pawn. So if he just moves his bishop around, this wall is always there, and black can't get in. And that's what happened. They moved around for a little bit. Why not? And then it was like 10 moves later, they called it a draw. I think it was a draw by threefold repetition. So just watching that was a joy to watch. What a great game. And then there's also sometimes, though, when you watch this, is you have the counter thought. It's like, how can I ever play chess like that? How can I notice these tactics so quickly? And there was a little theme in this game that could be worth noticing. So if we back up, let's go to that first critical position. So after b5, we retreated with queen c2. Right? In truth, that doesn't matter. I'm not saying I know the theory in this position very well. I did check the game with the computer, of course, because why not? But it's it. So anyway, what was black's last move? Black's last move is b5. And there's this rule or an axiom with chess, is that every move how do I describe this? Every move has a disadvantage. Every move is leaving something behind, right? We can see here, when this pawn was back here on b7, it was controlling the c6 square. It controls it. Once he plays b5, obviously the pawn cannot control that square anymore. So that would have given white the option of playing queen c6. If we saw in the game, what happened is he retreated queen c2, then black was able to play bishop b7, and then c5 right away. Had white played queen c6, it's attacking the rook, and so the rook has to move somewhere. If the rook moves to b8, perhaps bishop f4, and then if bishop b7, we can just cash in right away. So black will have to do something different. Perhaps he has to play the slightly awkward rook a7. And regardless, white now has gained a tempo to castle or to do whatever. That's a possibility. And so this is where, if you notice what the move leaves behind, so to speak, what the disadvantage of that move is, then certain moves, certain ideas might come out. I'm not explaining it very well right now, but these future examples are gonna, I think, will show. Here, white releases the tension with d takes c5, which wasn't the best move. here, and now it's this move. This is really the mistake that white makes. He plays rook d1. And so if we back up, right now, if we look at the rook on f1, okay, yes, the rook is more active when we move to the d file. But what's the rook doing here on f1? Is that it has some control over f2. It's helping to defend it. So when the rook moves over, all of a sudden, we should realize that f2 is much weaker. And all of a sudden, ideas like knight e4 or knight g4, they should really spring to our mind. Also, perhaps bishop takes f2 first. And this is actually what happens in the game, is that after rook c8, queen b3, we played bishop d5, okay, queen d3, bishop e4, queen d2. If we can now look, we take advantage, we could have played bishop takes f2, because if white recaptures, we then take the knight. And if white recaptures, all of a sudden knight e4 is a check, and we pick up the queen. If we remember what happened in the game, let's back up, is that black did the same idea, but in the wrong move order. Is first, he took the knight, then he brought his knight in to e4, right? Thinking that he has attack on the queen and the attack on the bishop. But what happened? Let's look at here. What was this knight doing here on f6? What's it protecting? What's it controlling? And what's it not protecting when it's here on e4? And that's right, it's d7. Because if we notice that, we suddenly realize that d7 is a little bit weaker. That helps us see white's counterattack. Take, 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 and then knight e5. And even here, if we back up, what's the king protecting on e8? It's controlling f7. And once it recaptures, that gives us this tactic, right? So if you can see what every move, the disadvantage of every move, right, that can help us look for what are otherwise hidden tactical ideas. King d6, knight takes f7, take, take. Even right here, black plays knight takes f2. So what was this knight controlling? Were there certain squares this knight is controlling that it's not controlling anymore? And there is. Bishop g5, we come on out. We play e3. Now the knight needs to move. The knight moves. Now that the knight is moved, are there any squares that we can control, or that we can it didn't control before? And yes, it was d1. That lets our rook slide into a better square. He moves back. Now this is white missed the best move in this position, which in his defense is very tough to see, especially in Blitz. When the king is here, and then it moves there, what is the disadvantages? What is it left behind? And the one answer, or one possibility, is that this rook no longer is protected. And so white could have played rook c1, pinning the bishop to this rook. And that will, the computer lines show, let this knight eventually be able to escape, and white is up a piece, and he's going to win the game. Now, rook c1 isn't the only move, and it's not, there's a whole bunch of good moves for white in this position, but rook c1 is the best. Now, the reason this is so tough to see is because we can see things like bishop takes e3, which is potentially forking, and now this rook is discovery attacked. We then realize that, okay, if we take, okay, we're okay that way. And if he takes like this, okay, we're okay that way. But there's this calculation that has to go on, which is, again, it's kind of unnecessary for a Blitz game, because so many moves were able to win, but to find this best move, it was tough. And the only way you're really going to see that is if you were to notice that when the king moves, this rook isn't protected, and that gives us the option of rook c1. Okay? Here, when black... excuse me. And then when black played h6, what squares are weaker? Again, this square is much weaker, and that's going to give, potentially, our knight a chance to escape. And in fact, that's what happens later in the game. It didn't happen right now. It happened much later, right? But we were able to use g6. h3. Doom, 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 doom. I think there's one more. Where is it? Maybe that was it. But this is in fact the again the spot that Black threw away the game, and it's easy to see why. Because again, they're low on time at this point, and for so long this knight has been trapped, can't do anything, and there's even a chance that Black isn't need. Let's see if I can talk. That Black doesn't even need to win the knight. That he can just keep it stuck there forever and use his 2 pieces to mop up material. That's a possibility. But what Black needed to do in this position was to play King G7. He had to do that. Because then he's going to win the knight, and that's it. The best white can probably just take a pawn, I guess. But this position will be completely winning for Black. But instead he played A5, which is completely understandable. And then after this, the knight escaped. And that was it. And so I hope you enjoyed the game. And I hope I explained this concept well enough. Is that every move has a disadvantage. Now, even the very first moves, right? Look at the beginning of the game. When white plays d4, right? Back here, this pawn, it was controlling these 2 squares. And if it went to d3, it could control those squares. So when it goes to d4, it's weakening these squares. Now, you're going to say, so what? And that's absolutely true, is that none of those really matter. However, there are certain openings. For instance, the stonewall attack, which is fairly popular at amateur level. And we can see that, the 2 pawns, they got control over here. But because both of these pawns have moved, that square is now weak. And this square is weak, and that's going to be weak forever. So every move does have a drawback. Now, most moves also have more of an advantage, right? And obviously you have to make some moves, right? Most moves have, if you play well, have more advantages than disadvantages. But if you can focus on what your opponent is leaving behind, on the weaknesses that his moves create, then you can start seeing tactics, and you can start even seeing strategy. Because in this position, we know that Black's strategy is going to eventually be to plop a knight onto e4, or to plop a piece there, and to work on a counterattack somehow that way. Maybe this pawn is weak. We can also see that because all of his pawns are on dark squares, that this bishop is going to be much weaker. And so Black now knows what his strategy is. Invade this pawn, invade this square, play against that bishop. Right? So that's how one possible way of thinking. Now, again, this Blitz game was absolutely phenomenal, and I'm not saying if in order to train this way of thinking, it really, really helps to look through games slowly. Like, don't try and do this in a game, your own Blitz games right away, because you're going to take a lot of time and it's going to be rough. But if you analyze games, right, you have time, and you can watch, especially master games, how often tactics happen, how often strategy unfolds because of the space left behind, the disadvantages of our opponent's moves. Okay, so that's that. I hope you enjoy that. Also, I guess, small mini announcement is that it's my birthday. Yay, happy birthday me. And one of my sort of New Year's resolutions is I'm going to be playing Blitz. I've never played Blitz very much. I've always avoided it because I don't see tactics this quickly. Right? That's just not what I am. But I'm going to try and get better at Blitz, get better at time pressure. So I'll be playing on Lichess, not sure how you say. This is absolutely beautiful, beautiful website, absolutely incredible. If you don't know about it, like, I've always been a chess.com guy, but like Lichess, just lots of free features. It's amazing. So I'll be playing there. I'll be trying to play at least once a week, hopefully more. My work schedule is no longer so incredibly crazy. That's that. And if I have really interesting games, maybe I'll post them. Maybe I'll just do like Blitz sessions if that's interesting. Some people have asked me to do that. If you really want to see me lose, or you want to get a lower opinion of my chess ability, yeah, you'll want to watch my Blitz. Yeah, I'll be SmithyQ there. So that's that. Again, questions, comments, let me know. I can do a more detailed analysis or of this concept as well later on, but if this one wasn't very good. So again, just let me know. I'll leave comments, feedback. It's always appreciated. So that's that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.